Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to our weekly Work Cookie podcast, where we meet with IOs, HR, recruiters, and one actor, and all those who look to help people in the business industry. Jeremy, today we're going to talk about how to clutch employee passions, ambitions, and talents. And I know that we've talked a little bit about this before, you and I, but do you want to maybe start off with why you think this is important to actually grab the attention of your employees and their passions and ambitions?
When a lot of us go, so it's said perfectly by Conley and Zigarami, two of the most prominent researchers when you look at work passion. And I'm going to get the quote exactly right here. The particular quote is, "Every day, the spirits of millions of people die at the front door of their workplace." And that's a 2019 quote from Conley and Zigarami. We'll be sharing some of their research today. And most of us, and naturally so, we have our work identities and then we have our personal identities. And sometimes we're vastly different when we're working. And sometimes it's, we're pretty much the same person when we're working. It depends on the person and the personality and also the demands of the workplace in terms of how much of your professional self do you need to bring. I have learned through so many experiences, through so many trainings, through so many workshops and I'm such a big fan and proponent of this just because I've seen it, that no matter what someone's passion is outside of work, somehow that can be brought into their workplace and translated. It's interesting because the research out there and the research that we're going to review today, I haven't seen much research in regards to what I just said in terms of bringing people's outside passions in. And I can understand why. When you look up the research on employee passion, usually it becomes employee work passion. And we'll look at how that is different than engagement. So most of the times we're going to find the science and the data on work passion, and we'll get into defining that. We'll get into what does that in particular mean? So I'll start out, and I'll end up sharing these references, these resources in the chat here, and they'll also be shared in the description of the podcast if you're listening to the recording. The first study, there's a lot of studies, right? But this one in particular I found pretty interesting. Is passion contagious? Transference of entrepreneurial emotion to employees. It's a study by Melissa Cardone, and I'll share it's from Human Resource Management Review. Volume 18, June 2008. One of the things I found interesting in this, so yes, we're looking at how, if you're an entrepreneur, can you transfer that passion? And there's a lot of correlations and parallels here to any leader, any manager in the workforce. And starting out, there's a model that is proposed. And I found this paper particularly interesting because it wasn't an actual study. It was more of a literature review. And for those of you who know, literature review, if you look at a scientific study, is that researcher looking at what is known, how has this been defined, what's already known based on the studies that have already been performed. So this is more of a literature review theoretical paper saying, hey, look at what hasn't been identified yet, hasn't been studied. Maybe other people should study it. So it's kind of like it's a exploratory and a nudge for future exploration. The interesting model here, I'll share my screen here because this is important. Tom, can you see that diagram up there?
Yes, I can.
Beautiful. What I found interesting about this is we look at entrepreneurial passion, and reading through this particular this article, I can see plenty of parallels in how this would work, because in general, it's talking about transformational leadership, which anyone can exhibit. For entrepreneurs, they're very passionate, and you get into this thing called emotional mimicry, which is interesting. And you think about, Tom, you've seen this, and you're in the acting world, and you've seen this on stage many times, especially during interviews, where maybe the interviewer will cross their legs, and then the person they're interviewing will cross their legs. And right now, we've all got our screens up. If I were to sit here and touch my face a couple times, I guarantee one of you would touch your face. We just do that. It's like a monkey see, monkey do. It's just something that we do naturally to try to relate to people. And they're based on these things called mirror neurons. I won't get into that. But same kind of thing. If you're in sales, you're taught to shake your head yes. Hey, do you want to buy this car? And you shake your head yes. And all of a sudden, the other person's shaking their head yes. That's called emotional mimicry. Now, entrepreneurs have this passion and leaders have this passion. And when it's positive all the time, that can start to rub off on employees. And they might start to feel that passion as well. But the thing is, that won't really stick. So there's other things that need to be done. And that's where, when you look at this model of, okay, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a business leader, you have passion. If you work more towards the transformational leadership aspects, where you're aligning goals, you're aligning ambitions, you're aligning talents, you're getting to know your employees and what makes them tick, you're speaking their language. That's when you get into the dual effect here of not only just the passion, which is positive and intense, that can rub off on employees, but now you start to add the next ingredient of organizational meaningfulness. And that together is what really makes a difference. So I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to throw it back to you, Tom, because I have a lot to share, but I don't want to share it all already and just take up everything. Tom, over to you.
Well, let me ask you, Jeremy, because we're here in Work Cookie, we're in a bit of a bubble, with IOs and HR people, and being an entrepreneur and understanding that passion. Why should I care? Because as an entrepreneur, I'm going to care. I mean, first of all, I'm the type of entrepreneur who wants my employees to be happy, but the majority of the entrepreneurs are going to first look at that bottom line. So do you have any numbers about how this improves productivity or the effectiveness of this? Should I be investing my time at all with this if it's not going to pay off financially?
Funny you should ask, Tom. I'm going to share my screen because I have a great answer for you here. And this is another article here. This is from Zigorami and some other authors. It's called Employee Work Passion, Connecting the Dots. And this is based on a ton of research. And it says right here, this model was grounded in a literature review of hundreds of studies and meta-analysis from 1980 to 2005. So lots and lots going on here. And here's really the answer to your question. And we'll turn this away from speaking purely. We'll kind of take entrepreneur and get that out of our vocabulary as much as we can for the rest, because that I think it transfers to regular leadership as we're talking about that. But here we go, and I'll read a little bit verbatim, a little paraphrase here. How is employee work passion different than engagement? And we're looking at, for HR, we're really looking at recruiting and turnover. We want, obviously, people to stay. And when you have more retention in the workplace, that has a lot to do with work continuity, skill continuity. Obviously, you're not, engaging in that recruiting process, which is, work hours and all the costs that it takes. So both organizational and job factors influence someone's level of their actual work passion. But when you look at just engagement, it's associated with either job commitment, and here we're thinking about things like burnout and well-being, or organizational commitment, which is their intent to stay. What are their reasons to stay? Are they emotionally attached to the workplace, which is the best indicator that they'll stay, or is it more normative? I'm staying because I feel I have to. They're giving me a job, and also if I leave, obviously I won't have a job and those benefits. When we look at employee work passion, we're looking at social cognition appraisal theory. So now basically we're looking at not just what they're feeling, but what they're thinking as well. This whole thing of the cognition aspect, because no longer are we looking at just engagement, where, all right, they're engaged, they're actively engaged, or they're actively disengaged, meaning they're trying to sabotage your company. But here we're looking at what are their intentions and also that cognitive aspect of it. Now, back to your original question, Tom, because I love to dance around and go around Jupiter and try to come back. All of these things, if someone is passionate about their work, they're passionate about the organization, they're emotionally attached, they're going to get, bottom line is they're going to stay and they're going to give their discretionary effort. Discretionary effort, just like discretionary spending, it's spending when you don't really have to. It's that extra money that you have in your pocket that's left over from your budget. It's the same thing with discretionary effort in the workplace. They don't really have to stay a little bit longer. They don't really have to help someone else with their work, but that's what they do when they have that work passion, and also when they're engaged, because they're thinking, yes, I like the company. Yes, I want to stay. Yes, I like my work. My boss looks at what I'm passionate about, what my talents are, and I can go to my boss. If I went to my boss and said, hey, boss, what are my biggest talents? What are my biggest skills? What am I passionate about? And what are my ambitions here or in another company? My boss is able to say that. And that's a good question for all of us to ask ourselves. If we asked our bosses those questions, would they be able to answer them? And for all the leaders out there, are you able to answer those questions if, in fact, your employees would come to you? So there is a ton that goes into thinking about this passion concept.
I'll answer for the majority of leaders, no. But let me ask you, because this is a great picture you're painting. But I know someone who came into an organization with all of the passion you're talking about, going to bring new ideas to the organization. A year has gone by. Most of those, great ideas and thoughts have been pushed to the side, and it's become mainly of, well, this is the way we do it here, so just do it our way. And I'm seeing the passion just bleed out. How do you, what's the trauma team for this? How do we go in and save this situation and bring that passion back?
I used to really be hard line when I thought about organizations that did that. This is the way we do it here, and it getting stomped on. And I've kind of gone towards the middle, because there is it makes sense. A lot of if you're a new employee, sometimes you might go and have these ideas that have already been tried. They know it won't work. But then I guess on the other side of it, you as the new employee might say, okay, but did you do it this way? Did you do it the right way? Did you make it more than a check the box? So it really is this balance to strike. And it makes sense for organizations, especially those that are not in the growth phase, but are in the more mature phase, because more mature companies that aren't looking to grow, they're looking really to sustain and slowly grow. Quite frankly, they may not just want those I'll just call them crazy ideas, crazy in a good way, because they're going to be hard to implement. A lot of managers might also like the employees' ideas, but also know, look, there's a lot of red tape here. I have some political capital in the organization, but I don't have that much political capital to give within the organization. There is a way to do it, though, and what those managers and those leaders can do is talk about those ideas. They can say, let's create maybe an idea journal, and let's review those once a month to see what might be feasible, to see what resources we have. So the idea is, don't pop the passion balloon of your employees when they're coming with these particular ideas. Latch onto them, continue to encourage them, just like you would. I say this all the time because I believe it's true. There's so many parallels between the workplace and with kids. You don't want to kill, if a kid is bringing this idea or is really passionate about something, the last thing you want to do with a child is say, oh, that's not a good idea. You want to build that child up. You want to get them to explore. You want to get them to be involved in the creative process. And you also, with employees, you want to get them to be in the creative process, innovating, and so forth. So think about ways that you as a leader, if it can't be done now, how can you still engage that employee? Maybe you tie it into what they're passionate about. That seems like a good idea. That's something you must have thought about because you want to be a nuclear scientist. Still engage that person. Maybe keep some kind of an idea journal that you can look at from time to time so that employee knows that they're being heard and understood. And then you're also building that trust and rapport where they're going to trust you that, hey, when the time is right, we're going to continue to talk about it. But at least this particular leader is providing me with meaningfulness, aligning what I'm doing with what the organization or the department is doing. And these are all really key dimensions to this thing we call employee passion.
There's a lot for leaders and managers to be embracing right now with all the changes that we're seeing. Do you think this is going to change the world of work?
What do you mean by this?
That these concepts that, I mean, the old paradigm is that, if I'm the leader, your incentive is your paycheck. That's why you're here. That's why we're all here. We do the work, we go home. And maybe that worked for our parents, didn't really work for us. And now we're seeing a whole generation, and I think people in general after the pandemic, there was a reset in their values and especially in their work-life balance. So we now have the Great Resignation. We have people who, the last survey I saw was, I think, in October, and something like 70 or 80% of the employees are thinking of quitting and leaving if they are forced back into the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And as we're shifting to this sort of new paradigm of work, it really seems that leadership and those people who manage others, the onus is really on them to see this new vision of, treating employees like adults, treating them fairly and equitably, and keying into things like their passions. So I'm sitting here going, oh my God, I'm starting to feel a little bad for managers and leaders because they've got a lot of work to do.
It's a huge change. There's not a whole lot of people out there that really love change, and it's always tough. And part of that is, how will this make things better? And how can you envision out, what happens if? It's about asking those questions. What happens if we do this? What happens if we start to focus on what our employees are passionate about? Again, with sticking in line with, project management goals and those kinds of things. And also looking at it's really, a lot of this is all about the retention aspect too, because we're looking at that plus productivity. But when an employee is at your workplace and they're living within their passion every day, and they're able to get excited about things and not have that passion balloon pop, whether it's getting on a committee, a work committee, whether it's an idea, whether it's I'm excited to cross train, whether it's I want to be an advocate for another employee, and having those kinds of ideas and whatever they're passionate about, or even creating, a side, kayaking or bicycling group within the workplace that they can do after hours, whatever those passions are. If you can latch on to those, it's going to be tougher for an employee to say, you know what, I'm going to go to another company and just really gamble that they're going to allow me to live my passions out during the day. And I'm really going to make that gamble that my new boss is going to be able to, after a couple months, say, yeah, I know what your passions are. Yes, I know what your ambitions are within the company or without, or your next move. Yes, I know what you're really talented about. Yes, I know what's important to you, because that's built up. And if your managers are doing that now, that all makes it tough for an employee to leave. And again, it goes back to discretionary effort. Do managers have it easy? No, it's a huge paradigm shift. And think about it too. A lot of the managers would love this themselves. So now those managers are saying, well, my manager has it tough now. So it's a lot of managing up in a lot of different senses. It wouldn't be a bad idea for a company to make some kind of initiative, not just to check the box, have it ground floor where it's conversations amongst managers, turn some meetings into meaningful meetings where they're talking about how can we get the most out of our employees? We're paying them a salary. until you're really looking at what those employees want to and can bring to the organization, you're not really getting your money's worth for the salaries that you're paying.
And with the new accounting methods, you can actually calculate that, and those employees that you retain actually increase the positive side of your bottom line. So we might have some advice here for people. Lee, let's go to you.
First, I want to say that, you hear me, I love the idea of an idea journal. I hadn't actually thought of it in those terms. I love that idea. But, this kind of ties into so many topics that we talk about. I mean, the communication aspect of this is huge. And, I've seen that, newer person come in with just bubbling with new ideas and just watch them have their soul crushed because they were just shot down. And no explanation, no anything, just no, or even worse, that's stupid. And and to have someone to actually sit down with them and say, that's a great idea, and we have tried that before, and have a conversation, and say, this is why it didn't work before, and then do you have a different idea? And this comes back to the difference between managers and leaders too. I mean, do what I tell you to versus the more collaborative effort. And actually, I think this is something where you can really kind of take a note from the military too, that, in the military, we're 24/7, right? So, your people because you have to deal with your people 24/7. And, something happens at 2 a.m. in the military, you call your boss. In the civilian world, your boss is going to be like, why the heck are you calling me? And so you spend a lot more time getting to know your people and getting to know their family and, that sort of thing than is common today in business. Back in the days when people worked 40 years for a company, I mean, yeah, you knew their families and everything else, but we don't really do that so much now. What I do see is a potential for a huge paradigm shift here, because when we get more collaborative and when we do shifting teams, we actually had a really fascinating conversation on teams makeup yesterday and about how don't just stick somebody in a team and forget about them, but change it up by the task. So instead of locking someone into a particular job title and job description, allow people to move around as the work changes. And so, if Bobby has got a particular skill set that will work on a particular project, great, let him move to that, and then let Susie, who has a different skill set, move over to take, whatever that was. And so everybody improves, everybody's happier because they're doing something they're enjoying. And on top of the employee buy-in, when you really get people passionate about what they're doing, they feel listened to, they feel like their ideas are valued, even if they're not implemented, then you have the benefit we've talked about them staying, but you also have the added benefit of when somebody says, hey, where do you work? And they're like, oh man, I work for the best place ever. And, and you've seen these people that, they're glowing. I mean, they're out wearing shirts with their employer's name on it and stuff. They're advertising, the best advertising you're going to get. And we have to change because, even if you're in the fast lane, you're going to get run over if you just sit there. So we got to change. Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. I recently had a conversation with Glenn Gaudet, who is the co-founder of Gagalamp, and he talks about how you can actually use your employees to, become advocates for your organization. And he invites all of his employees to go on, websites like Glassdoor and rate the company, because he wants people to understand what it's really like to work there. Jeannie, let's go to you.
So I wanted to say, there's a couple of things that Jeremy had said, and Lee both, where the organizations, there's such a thing that's called change fatigue, where the companies go through over and over and over again and try different things, and employees get sick of trying and changing. But a company that has an official organized change management program, there's a lot of different ones out there. Six Sigma is one of them. But there's also continuous improvement where it really specifies a structured way to manage that change, where they define the current problem, they research what has been done in the past, they analyze what the current state is and what the problem is, and then they do the scientific method where they form a hypothesis and they try one thing at a time. And then they go back to analyzing and see how that one thing works. And by continuously changing and figuring things out, then the company does make progress. And if they say, oh, that didn't work, let's try something else. It's also a way of managing your employee buy-in. If you work on it as a team and get the whole team involved and have members of the team each brainstorm and then decide upon what the problem is and what the course is that they want to change, you'll gain more of that employee buy-in and you'll gain some of that passion back from the old people and the new people, because you're actually asking for their opinions and you're asking for, what will work better.
And Jeannie, I think you've hit on something really important, that you've got to bring the expert in, that you need that expertise. We all have smartphones now, and I can tell you, there's a small production studio in your smartphone, but I wouldn't recommend you go out and shoot a feature film with it unless you have some expertise behind you. Dr. Martha, let's go to you. Oh, wait, Jeremy, I think you're back.
Yeah, if I may, I wanted to share this. It'll provide a nice baseline for some of the the questions that are asked when you look at employee passion. And I love what Jeannie said about going through these things in a systematic way. That's really important. Is the change actually needed, feasible, and really doing it the way that she mentioned, that really profitable is what I would call them, organizations do. So what I'm sharing right now, and this is from, for those of you listening, this is from the article 3-Factor Model of Employee Passion, an Empirical Study in the Indian Context by Gan and Mohanty. Right now, these are some things I wanted to share, and also some of the correlations. So when you look at, we're looking at 4 different things: work cognition, what you think about it; work affect, how you feel about it; work rumination, what you're thinking and how much you're thinking; and then job well-being. So these are the things that have good correlations with employee passion. When people are able to say, I am placed at the right place as per proficiency. So I'm working in the right place for proficiency. I find my job to be meaningful in this organization. I'm able to conceive new ideas to do the job in a better way. I find my workplace to be a breeding ground of new ideas. Those 4 factors have good correlations with work cognition and employee passion. Work affect, they are able to say, I'm enthusiastic about my job. I'm interested to master all the skills related to my job. I'm inspired to achieve excellence at my job. And I always take pride in my work. Always is the key term there. I always take pride in my work. Now, this is also, so workroom, if you're able to say, I avoid thinking about my job in leisure hours, then it seems like you have more work passion. Now, these 2 next ones are negatively correlated with work passion. I think about my job while commuting, my work while commuting, or I think about my work while doing other things. If you're doing that you likely have low work passion, because those are negative correlations. However, when you read further into the study, thinking about your work when you're off, while you're driving to work, when you're doing other things, that can have benefits, because then you're looking at creative, that can signal to passion. But in general, we're looking at that as controlled. So if you have controlled thinking about your work during leisure hours, other things, but this is why it says rumination. Rumination really refers to thoughts, more uncontrolled thoughts. In a sense, when you look at the clinical psychology, rumination means really worrying, is what that means, ruminating thoughts. And then also, if you're able to say, my job makes me feel excited, my job makes me feel energetic, my job makes me feel calm. Those also have good correlations with employee work passion. Tom, over to you.
Interesting. Dr. Martha, let's go to you.
There are a few things that are coming to mind as I'm listening here. I think one of the first things that is important to differentiate is passion and being good at something. Just because an individual is good at something doesn't mean they're passionate about this. And I've seen firsthand a young MBA started with a company, and after the first 6 months, her boss asked her to answer the phones because she was better at it than everybody else. She was really good on the phone. And she told him flat no. She was telling me this story. She told him flat no, I didn't get an MBA to answer phones. I could have stopped at high school. And she was so incensed, she was ready to quit. But her boss backed off. I guess he realized how ridiculous of a assumption that was, that just because you're good at something, this is where you should be, regardless of where you intended to be with the company. So that's something to consider, that what a person is good at is not necessarily their passion. They're just good at it. And then from there, I look at employees who have high level of work ethic, conscientious employees who always strive to do a good job. They're out there who just, no matter what job you give them, they strive to do a good job because this is their work ethic and this is who they are. That doesn't mean that they're passionate about every single task they're doing. And the third thing that I'm thinking about as I'm listening here is that, there are still people out there, employees out there, who keep work and their personal stuff, personal lives separate. So they have no need or desire to bring their passion that they have in their personal life into work. As long as they don't dislike their work, it's a means to an end. They go home and do their passion stuff. So, it's a balance. We really need to pay attention. Organizations have a tall order here, because if we're promoting something and an organization just jumps right in all the way, you might be stepping on some toes and making assumptions that aren't necessarily going to be helpful.
Once again, you might want to start with an IO just to assess the situation going on in your organization to see what you might actually really need. Linda Ann, let's go to you.
So I see this as a huge opportunity, because where I've worked and how I've had the performance management process work has been a tool to communicate all of these things. And so not only was there a quantifiable section where you're, okay, how are your communication skills? You do the self-review and you rank yourself on that. And then the manager ranks you on that particular skill or whatever. And you're looking for discrepancy. Are you perceiving the way I'm doing it the same way you're perceiving the way I'm perceiving the effort? And so it identifies areas for discussion where you're not seeing things the same way. There was a whole nother qualitative section that had questions that asked for different things. What's your most important achievement of the past year? What's your best learning experience? What sort of training and personal growth experiences would benefit you in the next year? Not just job skills, also your natural strengths and passions that you'd like to develop. What's your level of satisfaction with your projects? And it would go on. And for managers, it was, as a manager, what have you done in the past year to promote the development of your staff? And so it goes on. What are you perceiving as the most important goals and tasks? And, what can we do to improve the firm? And are you happy with the level of feedback you're getting, and all those kinds of things? And then there's the evaluation of how did you perform against your goals? And we would take the employees out for lunch and whatever, but the conversations would last 2 hours, maybe more in some cases. But that was the annual review, and that's an investment in your employees, and they saw it as that. And they appreciated it so much, and they communicated their appreciation on that. And you became aware of, what projects did they want to work on? Because think about this, if you're sitting there and there's a certain kind of project or whatever it is that you'd like to work on, and you see it given to somebody, 2 doors down, and for whatever reason, and you would want to you get frustrated, right? It's like, damn, I really would have liked that project. Well, nobody knew, right? So and then the manager, it's their job to do this stuff. We're talking about people, all the things that managers have to do and whatever. Know that I spent time to train those managers how to do these. The performance evaluation was structured so that it stepped them through the conversation. They had a tool there to use to direct that conversation, make sure they hit all those points, gather all that information. Now, the managers should have the bigger picture in mind. Okay, we're going down this road for the coming year. How do I place everybody? How do I don't know how you want to call it, strategize for how I'm going to use my talents with my team. But that's the art of management. But there's ways to train people, and there's tools to use, and there's tools that can be structured to get you there so that you have this information and the communication has taken place.
One of the reasons I love talking to you, Linda Ann, is that your views are proactive, that these are really the things HR should be doing. But I find most HR departments are reactive. They're, waiting for the next problem. So how does HR make that shift become more proactive? And in my mind, really an integral part of the success of this organization?
There's 2 things. One, there needs to be a change in perception. And I get frustrated when I'm working with people that I know in industry, and we're talking about certain situations in human resources, and they are very passive. Right? Human resources is not a passive position, but it's been treated that way. It's been treated as a glorified administrator. And human resources is not that. They can contribute so much more. And I'm going to tell you, it takes courage, and it's not easy to be that person in an organization who hasn't made that mental shift yet. But it's our job to get us there. And the benefit to it, the outcome is when you have done this, your job as a manager is actually easier.
Yeah, I think that's the message we really need to get out. But thank you very much for that. Brendan, let's go to you next.
So I wrote a couple of things down. Definitely with what Linda Ann is saying is that this idea that HR is so administrative and they can only do this, but I can't help but at least in my experience, a lot of that is just a philosophy that comes down from the executive level where it's, nope, this is all you're supposed to do. And it's like, okay, but that's fine. But as a consultant, I can do so much more than that. And I'm going to show you that. So leading into that also is, I think this is very relative to pay philosophies when you think about this conversation, because you have people now who are going, well, I want to get paid for the work I did, and that's why I should be getting this $20,000 raise or whatever it is. Whereas the common philosophy is, no, you're getting this pay raise for the work that you're about to do. And, that's where bonuses obviously are supposed to come and play for the previous work. But if your company doesn't do bonuses, it's a pay philosophy issue. And then when you are trying to monitor this work engagement, I had to write down OCBs because the idea of organizational citizenship behavior, if you don't see people participating in any of this different programs that you have that are geared towards employee engagement, then they're checked out. OCBs is as simple as, hey, the coffee pot's out and let me run another pot so that the next person goes to get it and it's fresh. Whereas somebody else will just go, yeah, I'm getting the last cup and screw the next person. So, there's a lot of stats, quality stats, just in those observations.
Oh, the old coffee conundrum. Yes, I've faced that one often. Dr. Martha, let's go to you.
I really like what Linda Ann was saying because it made me think about what a a review should be versus the standard review where it's very much a one-way conversation. And then I thought about training for managers, because as you said, Tom, there's so much that falls on managers as we're all going through this change. And, being in mid-management, you get it from both sides. But how much training are you getting? Even before we started all of this change that we're living through, I think that was one of the biggest problems. People were put into management positions in so many cases, and it was assumed that they had people skills, management skills, or any kind of skills. They were promoted because maybe they had a certain degree, or maybe they've been with the company long enough. So while we are recognizing how much is falling on the managers, what are we doing to help them? And as Linda Ann was talking, that's the first thing I thought about. What are we doing to prepare these poor people to handle this massive change? Because now they're taking responsibility for seemingly everything when it comes to the employee and their well-being.
We've often talked about, IO being the the longest career that you've never heard about. Do you think that part of what we're seeing is that lack of education, that those mid-level managers just don't know there's IOs around, or that they can get special help through the HR department, and we've got to once again promote the message?
Absolutely. Not only the middle managers, but organizations in general. How many people have no idea what an IO psychologist is? You tell them what you do for a living, and you've got that blank stare you have to explain. So that is part of the issue. If the organization isn't already set up to provide the right kind of training, and nobody knows that there's help out there, there are people who actually do this for a living, can help you professionally with this, then we're all kind of just swimming in the pool hoping not to drown.
Yeah, and Linda Ann, you know what an IO is, so let's go to you.
So I wanted to address the one thing that Brendan was talking about as far as the pay issue. And that was also part of the communication that we asked for from the employees in the self-evaluations. And that would, and I'll tell you why I did that. One of the questions at the very end of that particular self-evaluation was, do you expect a pay raise? And what is it? And then how can you justify asking for that raise? What's the justification for that raise? So we asked them what they were expecting in the way of their their salary increase, and then why they thought they deserved that. And so they had to come up with, well, I did X, Y, and Z. And sometimes, that's news to the manager that they didn't accomplish that, they didn't realize that was accomplished. The reason that was done was I couldn't believe it. It was horrible. One of the first performance reviews I had gone into with this particular company, they had the structure that they were using. They conducted the review, and then at the end, the manager told them what their pay raise or whatever, what he expected to give them was, and the employee was so upset by that particular pay raise. So what the information did, when you give someone what your expectation is, then that employer can go, okay, here's the expectation. Now I can prepare for, this is why I can give you that, or I can't give you that, and give you some justification. But the person doesn't leave at that point going, how fast can I get my resume out the door on Saturday? So it totally changes some of the dynamic and prevents that. So they left that particular performance review. So, it was an extremely negative experience.
Well, let me ask you, because, you mentioned earlier about, communication skills and evaluations. And my experience is that when you give someone an evaluation on their communication skills, they go, yeah, I can communicate really well. When the truth is, you can't. So are sometimes, do we have to look at those areas like communication skills and go, I may know a lot, but there's always more I can learn?
Oh, absolutely. And even in the quantitative section, there was areas for explanation. So this is, I'm rating myself a 4 because X, Y, and Z, or the employer or the manager saying, I'm giving you a 2 because of X, Y, and Z. And so there's that sharing of information for here's what's going on. We have to talk about what's going on.
Yeah, and from that, we can set a direction and we can move forward. Jeremy, let's go to you.
I was really looking forward to this event today, and it all holds true. This is so exciting. I love everyone's comments and the great insights that we're coming up with. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm also, for those of you listening to the podcast, I'm going to be, Tom, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Hey, Tom, that's good news. I'm going to share, going back to this particular article, Employee Work Passion, Connecting the Dots. It's by Zigarami, Howson, Witt, and Deal. And starting out, so it's a publication, looks like, from the Kim Blanchard companies, and most people have heard of Kim Blanchard through many, many books on leadership, etc. They started out and they did this study. The bottom line of the particular study that they did, they were creating this model that they ended up titling the Leadership Profit Chain. And the study found that employee work passion was a key factor in creating customer devotion and organizational vitality. So that's one of the findings there. But what I want to do is I want to run through, because this is important. It might the energy might go down for a little bit for the next couple of minutes, but I think these factors are important. So I'm going to share what they found, and they actually narrowed down into the organizational factors, job factors, moderating factors, and also the intentions through all of this 25 years of research. So I'm referring here to figure 1. You guys can see it that are here with me us today. Employee work passion factors. Organizational are collaboration, distributive justice, and that means the extent to which compensation, workloads, resources, all those things are balanced out. Procedural justice, the extent to which policies and procedures are consistently and fairly applied. Growth, the extent to which there's support for current and future career growth, meaning individual. Performance expectations. Then I'm going to go to job factors, meaningful work, autonomy, and autonomy is so important. I'm going to read how they define it. The extent to which individuals can choose how tasks are performed, are trusted to do their jobs, and have the authority to make decisions. Autonomy is such a big one. Feedback, how much adequate feedback and how often do they receive that? Workload balance, task variety, the moderating factors. So here are the things that have, push something one way or the other. That's what we're looking at for the moderating factors in layman's terms, I suppose. Connectedness to their leader. How well is their leader building rapport and building those personal and professional relationship? Same thing with colleagues, connectedness to colleagues. And then intentions here. Discretionary effort, which we covered quite a bit earlier. How much this extra effort are they spending on behalf of the organizations beyond agreed upon requirements? Intent to perform, the extent to which the individual intends to do his or her job well and work effectively to help the organization succeed. What we refer to as OCB, organizational citizenship behaviors, the extent to which the individual is committed to supporting fellow workers and behaving in ways that are respectful, considerate, and sensitive to others. Employee endorsement. This looks like a little bit of the employer brand stuff, Tom, that we talk about a lot, maybe just disguised under a different name. The extent to which the individual readily endorses the organization to others as a good place to work and as a quality supplier of goods and services. And then also, of course, intent to remain. How much do they plan to stay at the current organization? And let's follow up with this is employee work passion defined. Employee work passion is, according, everyone's got different definitions. This is how they defined it. An individual's persistent, emotionally positive, meaning-based state of well-being stemming from continuous, recurring cognitive and affective appraisals of various job and organizational situations, which results in consistent, constructive work interactions and behaviors. Tom, I mentioned that the energy would go down a little bit because I had to read so much, although it was so important. So how would you evaluate me? I got it at the end. I decided to use pauses and changes in the tonality of my voice to make it, and pitch, just to make it a little more exciting.
I think you're getting there, Jeremy, but I did learn a second language while you were speaking. So, always room for improvement.
That's why I started chuckling when I read employee passions defined, because again, this is part of the problem is, are we really speaking the language of other people? So yeah, it's a little there, and we'll try to make it a little here.
Linda, let's go to you.
I just want to respond to something in the chat from Deanna, and that was, she's talking about how if we're talking about performance and separating the pay conversation from the performance conversation. And I think I know there's I've been through that transition as well. I think it really depends on your level of how you're doing salaries, and are you doing merit pay, and are you doing merit pay well? And so I think that needs to be a very careful process, because I think it can be very demotivating depending on the environment. If it's set up to be a merit pay situation and you're not having that direct correlation, or having people understand their direct correlation, or feeling like they have an impact on that, then it can be very demotivating. Like, why should I put the extra effort? So I think that is a really important conversation to have, but so I think you have to be very careful about it.
Let me just, we're down to just a couple of minutes, but you've raised an issue and a question popped into my mind, and it's looking at the new accounting methods that are coming on stream now, and the notion that you may be paying a certain employee $100,000 a year, but the true value that you're recording on your balance sheet, the value of that employee is $200,000 a year. Does that now become part of the salary discussion?
Shayo, I've had those conversations where employees perceive that, right? Where they think, okay, well, I brought in this huge client, so I should get this huge raise. That's really not how it works. There's so much more to that conversation. And if you want to go through the complete accounting process, well, that's fine. But yeah, that I would.
Well, I personally don't want to go through the accounting process, but I think that discussion is coming. So it'll be interesting when we get to that point. Jeremy, we're out of time for this week, but I see that there is a Mind Trap game coming up tomorrow.
Yes, tomorrow it is Brendan is leading our Pathfinder member Mind Trap game at noon Eastern. So if you're a member, log into your portal or check one of the recent emails that were sent out for the link to that. Please join us. And thank you, Brendan, for leading that. I also want to mention Destiny and I recorded this morning a Veterans Day podcast, which, I of course, I feel is amazing because it was a great time. So those of you here and those of you listening to the podcast, it'll come out before you hear it, but still catch it. That'll be posting tomorrow, Friday, probably around 7:30 a.m. So happy Veterans Day, and thank you for all who served. That podcast will come out tomorrow morning, so please check that one out. Also, there are a couple CBOC downloadable free guides on the CBOC website under resources, and there is some information on this employee work passion and talents and how that plays into onboarding, how that plays into management and effective management. So there's a couple free guides that include the topic of today. And I'll also quickly mention, check out the cboc.com/events page. Next week, our topic is promoting peer-to-peer recognition in any workplace, and that will be Dr. Destiny Preet and Tom Bradshaw leading that one. Our main event for this month is the workshop that we have on November 17th at 1 p.m. It is employee engagement and appreciation initiatives for your workplace. And of course, we have Pathfinder peer group meetup later in the month. We have our biweekly momentum sessions, and next Tuesday, 6:30 p.m. joint networking event between CBOC and Destiny Preet's IO military experts at 6:30. So check out the events page for that. Tom, that's all I got.
And with that, I think we should wrap it up. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, and we will see you again in 1 week's time.